Welcome to Matt's Financial Geopolitical from the Frontier, and thank you for stopping by. I'd like to thank His Excellency Ambassador Geoff. He's the Australian ambassador to Kenya and a number of countries here in the region, for a lovely lunch, very informed conversation, and a good time. Thank you. We went to the Dusit, which has just opened here on Riverside, not far away from my office, and they have what's called a businessman's lunch, which you're meant to be able to complete in 45 minutes. And then I had dinner with Charles Island of East African Breweries yesterday. There's a friend who taught me how to drink Guinness. I've actually, drunk Guinness once, and he went through this whole tasting process, and I told Charles about Mr. Jacobs, who was my English teacher at Westminster, who used to host the Wine Tasting Society, and we were all about 14 then, and would never follow his instructions, which were to gurgle, release the flavours, spit out, and then taste another wine, because we were 14 after all. Charles had a word with me about my hedge. It's a bougainvillea one. It had gotten very overgrown, and he lives nearby. We've now trimmed it, and I'll put up a photograph I took nearly a year ago when they had a Johnny Walker party at the Fairmont, and it was a lot of fun. The dollar has been punching higher, as I said in August, and I think it's going to continue much higher, but it might be a little bit overbought right now. I took this photograph of the sunset outside my window yesterday, looking in the direction of the sunset, and then practically at the same time I took a photograph of the city at 6:29 p.m. I'll put that up as well. And then I go back to Pablo Neruda, and I pace around, hungry, sniffing the twilight, hunting for you, for your hot heart like a puma in the barrens of Kutratu. I hunger for your sleek laugh, your hands the colour of a savage harvest. Hunger for the pale stones of your fingernails. I want to eat your skin like a whole almond. Pretty powerful, isn't it? Barack Obama tweeted, "I'm going to squeeze every last bit of opportunity to make the world a better place over these last 2 years." Burkina Faso, West Africa's Arab Spring, dramatic ousting of Blaise Compaoré by popular uprising in Burkina Faso last week, and the speed being the word to remember with which it happened, caught some observers by surprise, me included, putting the number of people they put on the street. There had been serious warnings about the threat to the socio-political stability of the country for the last few months following the 2011 protests and the breakaway late last year of senior ruling party members from Compaoré's regime. Yet few predicted that his insistence to cling to power through a constitutional amendment would so infuriate the citizens of Burkina Faso that they would take to the streets and set fire to the Parliament building where the vote was to take place last week, 30th of October. Who are the protesters that chased away Compaoré after 27 years in power? Who took the initiative to tear down a statue of the ousted leader in the second city of Bobo Dioulasso earlier last week? A gesture reminiscent of the fall of Saddam Hussein in 2003 or Muammar Gaddafi in 2011. And then talking about the population of 17 million, 60% are between the ages of 17 and 24 years old, says the World Bank. And in fact, males in that age group are considered the most dangerous in many respects. Being dropped by France, however, was not the deciding factor that sealed Compaoré's fate. In 2012, former Senegalese President Abdoulaye Wade didn't have France's support either when he wanted to stand for a third mandate. And then talking about Wade being defeated at the ballot box. The implications of the recent events in Burkina Faso for the rest of Africa are still not clear. When the protests in Ouagadougou broke out last week, praise streamed in on social media from pundits across Africa, including places like the DRC and the Republic of the Congo, where heads of state are also suspected of wanting to cling to power, despite constitutional term limits. There are important differences between these countries and Burkina Faso, such as the size of the population, the stance of the military, the ethnic composition of voters, and the support of the international community. What seems clear, though, is that an increasingly informed and connected youth population, frustrated at the lack of democracy in their countries, has immense power. This is a point I've made previously. Long-serving heads of state should probably take note. And I wrote, events in Ouagadougou were certainly breathtaking, and I think the signal in the noise is that any ousting needs overwhelming speed, or what Virilio calls escape velocity. And I think that's what the lesson I'm drawing from Ouagadougou is. There is also clearly a rebalancing in favor of the ruled versus the rulers. And then I realized Alberto Giacometti's chariot was sold for $101 million at Sotheby's on November the 4th. And I thought to myself, a chariot is all about speed. That took me to Virilio, the logistics of perception. Virilio and the concept of pure war. I don't claim to define the situation. I try to reveal tendencies, and I think I've revealed a number of important ones. The question of speed. Speed is the essence of war. Technology is producer of speed. War is logistics, not strategy. War is preparation of means and ends, and no longer as battles, declarations of hostilities. History progresses at the speed of its weapons systems, he says. Donald Rumsfeld of the 21st century, we're going to have to stop thinking about things, numbers of things and mass, and think also, and maybe even first, about speed and agility and precision. And it's very interesting, but the point I'm making is I think, what happened in Ouagadougou, the lesson to draw from there is all about speed. In geostrategic terms, pure war is derived from the historical shift in military thought from defense to offense. The very long period of the supremacy of defense over offense marked the history of fortification, is superseded today by the era of the supremacy of the absolute speed of weapons of interdiction on the field of battle over the movement of the relative speeds of mechanized forces. At first the battlefield was local, then it became worldwide, and finally it became global. It's interesting thinking, but I think in this case, although it's so distant from where Virilio is speaking about, which is very advanced, sort of US level weapons systems, what was interesting is that this was all about speed. You came in, they hit it hard, they sacked Parliament, and no one could stop that because of that. In the end, however, the man popularly known as Beautiful Blaze spectacularly misjudged the people he had ruled. Imad Mesdua tweeted, Burkina Faso Colonel Zida had some important visitors today. Presidents Mahama, Sall and Jonathan were in Ouagadougou for talks. Washington Post has an interesting piece about the Iranian general who is said to mastermind the Iraq ground war, Soleimani. Is described as fearless, one pointing out that the Iranian general never wears a flak jacket even on the front lines. Soleimani has taught us that death is the beginning of life, not the end of life, one militia commander said. Death toll from Saudi Arabia Ashura shooting rises to 8. Saudi Arabian security officials moved aggressively on Tuesday to stamp out further anti-Shiite violence, arresting 15 people in 6 cities and killing 2 others in connection with what the Interior Ministry called a terrorist ambush. The identities of the assailants and their affiliations were not disclosed, but the ambush raised speculation. This is the point, that Saudi-born Sunni jihadists who had joined militant groups in Iraq and Syria had brought their violent zealotry home, an outcome that Saudi rulers have long feared. I think Saudi Arabia is a lot more brittle than many people allow. And then I found this photo which was circulated on social media showing Saudi policemen standing beside the body of an Al-Qaeda suspected militant. Erdogan has built a $615 million palace. Bloomberg View is saying Turkey joins the big palace club. Erdogan loves construction projects, from a planned airport that would be the biggest in Europe to a shipping canal to rival Panama's. This building frenzy has helped Turkey's economy, but it has also got Erdogan in trouble last year, triggering riots. Now he has completed a presidential palace that is 4 times as big as Louis XIV's Palace of Versailles, at a cost of $615 million. It displaces the Sultan of Brunei's residence as the biggest in the world. The Turkish president is trying to make several points. The first is that his country has arrived as a world power. The White House is only 55,000 square feet. Erdogan's new house is 3.1 million square feet. I like this tweet from the Banksy Twitter handle: in the age of information, ignorance is a choice. I think Benjamin Netanyahu's squeeze on Jerusalem will not end well, I'm afraid. Moving on to currency markets, Euro 125.21. It's widely expected that the ECB will leave its main refinancing rate at a record low of 0.05%, according to every economist surveyed by Bloomberg. Draghi will hold a press conference afterwards. That's always interesting. Dollar index 87.22. Japanese yen, I think, is oversold, 114.45. Touched 115.52, the weakest since November 2007. Swissy 0.9615, pound 159.91. So just trying to hold on or near to that 160 level. Aussie 0.8607. Reached the lowest since July 2010 after the price of iron ore, a key export from the nation, declined to its lowest level in more than 5 years as China ordered some steel mills to cut production. Aussie tumbled as low as 0.8594. Indian rupee 61.44, South Korean won 10.8530. Rial above 250 at 250.47. Egyptian pound 715.08 and the rand 1114.06. A measure of foreign exchange price swings climbed to the most in more than a year. That's noteworthy. I think the dollar might pause a little bit before the next leg higher. I'll put up a 3-month chart of the dollar index. We're at multi-year highs in this thing. In fact, the Bloomberg spot dollar index was at the highest since April 2009. Euro dollar, my target is actually 1-to-1. I'll put up a 3-month chart. Gold, 1145.21. I believe we're headed to 1,000. SCAB and AMRO is looking for 850. And I think the unwinding of the super cycle will take gold below $1,000 an ounce. Crude oil, I'll put up a 5-day chart, 78.81. And I don't think dead cats bounce very high. Rallied, contract climbed $1.49 yesterday. It's a big draw in the US. Crude oil, I'll also put up a 6-month chart. You can look at it. It's been a spectacular collapse. And I go back to sort of the US now being the price setter for the oil markets, and this being a deep and important geopolitical development. Coming to Africa, the DR Congo is debating whether to amend or not to amend the constitution. This is their information minister, Lambert Mende, said unlike what happened in Burkina Faso, where President Blaise Compaoré asked the parliament to amend the constitution so he could extend his 27-year rule, there is no institutional initiative in the DRC to change the constitution. Apparently 2,000 people demonstrated over the weekend against what they say is an attempt by President Kabila to amend the constitution so he can run for a 3rd term. And I think this is now an entirely different proposition post-Ouagadougou. I'll put up a photograph of President Joseph Kabila. South African all shares up 7.482% this year, but 2,525 points below a record high from July the 29th. Dollar rand, 11.1325. I think that's headed to 12. Egyptian pound, where it's been for a very long time, 7.15. The Egyptian stock market is up 40.0176%. Up second to Dar es Salaam only. And I remember writing at the beginning of the year, if the equity markets had a vote in Egypt, Army Chief General Abdel Fattah al-Sisi would actually get one of those impossible to believe votes of 99.80%. The Nigerian all share is now down 12.995% year to date. has retreated 7,072 points since July the 16th. And I wrote about this on October the 27th when I said the lowest oil price in almost 4 years is weighing big time on African oil producers such as Nigeria, where the Naira has been wobbling. Nigeria relies on oil for only 14% of its GDP, but crude makes up 95% of foreign exchange and 80% of government revenues. Foreign portfolio investors fearing heavy losses on the currency have pulled out. The main share index hit a 16-month low. The Naira has lost 4%. The stock market has fallen 10 days in a row. And Nigeria has overtaken Zimbabwe as the worst index in Africa, falling for a 10th day, down 12.5%. Zimbabwe's benchmark gauge is down 11.7%. And I think we're going lower still, because in these sorts of environments a lot of shortcuts come to light, and you get a situation where it always compounds on itself. Ghana's stock exchange is up 3.916% in 2014. Gold and diamond sales are being used to finance conflict in the CAR, and UN peacekeepers should monitor mining sites to clamp down on illicit trade. This is a UN panel of experts. Corrupt officials and Chinese gangs destroy Tanzania's elephant population. Chinese criminal gangs are conspiring with corrupt Tanzanian officials to traffic vast quantities of ivory, which finds that the trading is so pervasive it even involves high-level diplomatic visits. Tanzania has lost half of its elephants in the past 5 years, and 2/3 since 2006, mostly to poaching. This has left the country with an elephant population of just 50,500, making it by far the world's biggest victim in the ivory trade. At the other end of the trade chain, China is the biggest consumer as the rapidly growing middle-class population seeks ivory as a status symbol. The Environmental Investigation Agency has found that criminals and top-ranking officials are colluding in the illegal trade in ivory and calls for a zero-tolerance approach to the crime. It reveals how in December 2013, an official visit by a Chinese naval task force to Tanzania's capital city, Dar es Salaam, spurred a surge in business for ivory traders, with one dealer boasting to EIA investigators of making $50,000 from sales to naval personnel. I'll put up a photograph of elephants crossing the Iwaso-Nyiro River in the Samburu. I'd like to go back there again. And elephants on the 1st of September 2013 in the Amboseli. Kenya, now this oil price development has some ramifications. East African oil safe from price drop. Policies are the problem. This is Edmund Blair in Reuters. Tougher government terms will squeeze corporate rewards, not the sharp crude price drop, are the more potent threat to East Africa's oil boom. 25% fall in prices to below $85 a barrel has rattled high-cost producers, but industry insiders say Kenya and Uganda have enough oil to secure investment. These projects are long-term, multi-decade projects, and hence short-term variations in the oil price don't fundamentally change their value. This is Tullow Oil in a statement to Reuters. There is a sense that that's not really representing the true feeling, there is a lot of disillusionment in this area, particularly because they like to down tools twice, a lot of interference and noise at the local level, price structure sort of now completely inverted compared to what it was before. There is a little bit of give and take. I kind of feel recently the government's been more focused on the take side. You can say that again. They do need to do some nurturing as well. What has rattled investors in Kenya, however, is a move to impose a capital gains tax on energy firms that legal experts said would be set at a rate of 37.5% for foreigners, 30% for residents from Jan 1. We honestly believe that this could have a negative adverse effect on investment in Kenya. That's Keith Hill, Africa Oil. Given we're at a very early stage in this country, you don't want to start putting on a lot of burdens before it gets up and off the ground. And I wrote about this point, on November the 3rd. I said policymakers need to react with speed but history informs us that policymakers are typically very slow to react to trend changes, of which I think what's happened in the oil market and gold market is one. And I said the commodity super cycle is now dead in its tracks. This is a major turning point and represents a major shift away from commodity producing countries and towards global consumers and consumer countries. Africa Oil wants a deal to reduce its stake in Kenya fields by early 2016. I bet they do. Africa Oil shares have fallen from $7.30 Canadian dollars at the start of July to $3.50 this week. Rio Vipingo warned on Wednesday that its profit in 2014 could fall by at least 25%. Of course, it's not traded at the stock exchange since November 2013, when its majority shareholder REA Trading made an offer to buy out the company. I'll put up a link, you can check the share price data. Kenya shilling is at 3-year lows, 89.753. Of course, we've got a very strong dollar it's having to deal with. Nairobi all shares up 16.509%. Bounced yesterday and was lifted entirely and single-handedly by Safaricom, which was reacting to those much better than expected results. Safaricom is now opting to go it alone in a high-speed internet plan. This is around 4G networks. We have decided to go it alone because we're not seeing the feasibility of a joint network the government has been talking about for the past 2 years. NSE 20 fell sharply in just over 50 points yesterday, in contrast to the all share, which was lifted by Safaricom, and is now 305 points below a 2014 and 6-year high from September. I was interviewed by Duncan of Reuters, and I said, I think some funds must be shoring up their losses in Nigeria by selling stocks here in Kenya. I think the weakness should stop in Kenya because it's an importer of oil, I said, and was likely to benefit from the drop in oil prices. Catalyst, this is Paul Kavuma, who was at Kenton with me and bought a stake in a bank called Jani Bora Bank. Safaricom lifted the stock exchange yesterday and the all share reversed a losing streak to close 0.62 points higher. The NSE 20 retreated 50.35 points. The shilling was at 3-year low. Safaricom surged 4.098% to close at 1270, traded shares as high as 13. This, bear in mind, was in a soft market. I've already gone through the results, but essentially, it's a bellwether stock, beat consensus earnings estimates by quite a wide margin. Uchumi has been undergoing a very torrid period at the stock exchange, seeing at least 7% of its shares trade of late at a deep discount to the rights issue price that's coming. But at a market cap of 25 million, PE of 5.862, I don't understand where it can go from here. It's certainly not lower, but then you never know. Equity traded second in volume terms to Safaricom yesterday and eased 2.03%. It's still up 56.91%, but it's corrected 18.22% since closing at a record on the 23rd of September. KCB unchanged. Insurance sector, of course, had caught the eye because of the news around Pan-Africa. And I said to Duncan again, it's a red-hot sector, a lot of acquisition activity and interest going on. Britam down 4.901%. EABL, that's Charles Island, ticked 0.7% higher. And it's rallied about 4.72% over the last 4 weeks at a time when the market's fallen by over 4%, which is an interesting point. Once again, I am deeply grateful that you stopped by, and I hope you'll stop by again. Thank you.